Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. Some people in the XRP community have expressed concern the past couple days because the SEC submitted a legal brief to Judge Torres declaring that the appeal against Ripple is ongoing, as in currently it's unfolding. And of course, now that was April 8th, so it was 2 days ago. But, that's despite the fact that a couple weeks ago, Ripple reported that the lawsuit was over pending SEC commission approval. So what gives? The SEC saying the appeal's ongoing, Ripple saying this thing's over. What gives? Well, today in a joint filing, there's more proof that the appeal process is coming to an end, and I don't find this remotely surprising. It does not make sense to be concerned about this anymore. It simply just doesn't. Now, it's also noteworthy that today, this is the first time that the SEC and Ripple have officially told the court that they have reached an agreement to end this legal mess. Finally, we actually have something in writing, and it went to the court. And it's from both sides, because we haven't seen anything from the SEC previously that was parroting what Ripple had been asserting, the last couple weeks. And not that I was doubting Ripple, it's just that, there's a particular process, and the SEC commissioners, they do have to actually vote on this thing. But that's why we got this headline from CoinGape. XRP News: Ripple and U.S. SEC files joint motion post-lawsuit settlement. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say are right. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, and so headlines like the one on your screen now, this is from yesterday, are the reason that some people in the XRP community were being Debbie Downers, being a little bit concerned. Here's the headline from the Crypto Basic yesterday. SEC files new motion in Ripple lawsuit, says case is still on appeal. And here's the sentence right here from the SEC, from the document filed April 8th, that concerned people. It says, first, and this in reference to something else, which I covered in detail in a video yesterday, so you won't understand what there is being discussed here without that context, but it's not necessary for the purpose of this video, so I'm not going to rehash it all. I'm just going to read this sentence as is. It reads as follows from the SEC. First, the request is improper because the subject matter to which it relates, the court's summary judgment order and imposition of remedies, is presently on appeal such that this court lacks jurisdiction to entertain the request. And so that's the part that was concerning people, is presently on appeal. Why is that being stated? And then nothing indicating, yeah, it's on appeal, but we've reached a conditional agreement to end this thing, because there's nothing about that in here, right? But then we get this. Shout out and credit to attorney James K. Filan of the XRP community here. He shared this most recent document. And this is from just a few hours ago. This is from 2:58 p.m. Central Time. And James wrote, the parties have filed a joint motion to hold the appeal in abeyance based on the parties' agreement to settle. The settlement is awaiting commission approval. No brief will be filed on April 16th. And so that's what the date by which Ripple was supposed to have filed something, but now that simply is not happening. And so it's just, it's just we're in a state of suspension right now. And so that's what they mean when they use the word abeyance there. And I want to share with you just a few sentences here of what the SEC wrote in this document. The rest of it, it's not necessary to get the key points across. But here's what on this joint document was filed. The Securities and Exchange Commission, appellant cross-appellee Ripple Labs Inc., appellee cross-appellant Bradley Garlinghouse, appellee and Christian A. Larson, appellee, jointly move to hold these appeals in abeyance in light of the parties having reached an agreement in principle, subject to commission approval, to resolve the underlying case, the commission's appeal, and Ripple's cross-appeal. An abeyance would conserve judicial and party resources while the parties continue to pursue a negotiated resolution of this matter. Okay, and so there you go. Both teams saying, hey, we got a solution. It's over. So there wasn't, it did not make sense to think that, this was actually going to proceed like the SEC. I mean, it has been made very clear that the war on crypto is over in the United States. It is. So it's just a matter of, from a technical perspective, winding down every single damn lawsuit, including stuff like this. But it's over. It is. So we're just going through the procedural mess of getting something. So to think that just because the SEC in a document said that, hey, this is still under appeal, to think that that would override the end of the war on crypto in the United States, to me, that was just a little bit silly. Just my humble opinion, nothing personal, anybody. But here's what attorney James Murphy had to say. He's also known as Meta Lawman on X. He wrote, "This tracks with what Stuart Alderati previously reported publicly." And of course, Stuart Alderati is Ripple's top in-house lawyer, chief legal officer. Anyway, attorney Murphy said, "Both sides are, for the first time, representing to the court that an agreement in principle has been reached. There is no reason to believe there will be any problem getting commission approval for the deal." And so, folks, this could be happening sooner than later. For all I know, could be within a matter of days. Now, here's a post from attorney Fred Rispoli yesterday, before we got this most recent document and news. He wrote, on SEC v. Ripple, expect to see something happen on or before next Wednesday, April 16th, the due date for Ripple's appellate brief. Ripple cannot get an extension and either has to file it, 10% chance, or there will be a notice of settlement slash withdrawal, 90%. And so we've certainly got something. We got something filed today, and I'm just kind of wondering, are we actually finally going to get this vote to go through so we can officially wrap this thing up? Because that is the final thing we're waiting for at this point, right? We're not expecting any other documents to be filed. I mean, we could get surprised, stuff happens, but we're not expecting anything else from any party to actually be filed here, unless you get something from the judge confirming, but you know, that's not a huge deal. So we did get something. So good call on that, attorney Rispoli. But anyway, so then he added to that just a bit earlier today, and this is before the news broke out here. He said, "Seeing some confusion out there, remember there are two jurisdictions at play. Number one, Southern District of New York, that would be with Judge Torres, and two, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Nothing can happen in one, modify order, for example, the injunction against Ripple, until two is resolved by settlement slash withdrawal." And so somebody was wondering, so does this mean it's going to take a long time yet? And attorney Rispoli said no, thankfully. He hasn't changed his expectation of the timeline. He wrote, "No, my guess is 60 days or less from the date Ripple first announced the settlement and fine reduction." Now, former SEC attorney Mark Fagel responded to that. And this was not long ago, about an hour ago. Let's see what time. 4:44 p.m. Central Time, and it's 6:34 p.m. Central as I record this. And so he wrote, "Except today's joint motion suggests to me that the party's settlement in principle contemplates a return to Torres to revisit the injunctive order before the appeals are dismissed." And so that would be interesting. So it actually goes to her first, despite the difference in, in which court this appeal process is playing out. Attorney Rispoli responded and said, "Procedurally, I guess I'm not exactly sure how it works. The parties are 100% going to return to Torres to modify the injunction, but I'm assuming that must require the somewhat of a gamble of withdrawing the appeals in order to reinstate Torres's jurisdiction, right?" And attorney Fagel did respond to that and said, "I'm not an appellate lawyer, and this is not formal for the SEC, but I assume the abeyance would return jurisdiction to Torres, and her determination on the injunction will let the parties decide whether to drop their appeals." And then attorney Rispoli simply wrote, "Makes sense, and yes, it's certainly novel territory we are in. Thanks, Mark." So it'd be interesting if that's procedurally how it goes down, and there seems to be some question marks over that. But either way, I'm still confident this thing's going to get wrapped up one way or another, and it's going to be favorable to Ripple, let's be real. Then we also had this. Attorney Bill Morgan on this news wrote, "Finally, the parties had to do something before the Ripple brief was due on April 16th. At least we now have a public acknowledgement by the SEC of the settlement. Interested to see what indicative ruling will be sought from Judge Torres." And attorney Mark Fagel responded to this as well, and he said, "Presumably, the SEC wanted Atkins at the helm for the vote, and having him vote his first day on the job would have been bad optics, not that his support for this isn't assured. So this avoids the minimal risk that Ripple declines to submit a brief and something goes sideways." And so that is true, and I haven't had the opportunity yet to highlight this yet on my channel, but it is true that Paul Atkins has been confirmed by the U.S. Senate to take over the SEC, formerly run by Kim Jong-Ginsler. And he is the first ever pro-crypto SEC chairman, the first ever in the United States. You love to see it. And as my fellow XRP YouTuber highlighted here, as I was sharing this news yesterday on X, I just haven't shared it on YouTube yet, he said, Chip wrote, "You're ready for the cherry on top? Once crypto legislation is passed, the SEC will have very little to do with crypto. The CFTC steps in to run the show." And so that's awesome, because the SEC, frankly, shouldn't be in charge of pretty much anything having to do with crypto. And that's the way it's going to be. So yeah, pro-crypto SEC chair, happy to see it. But he's not even going to be overlooking crypto. So kind of funny. We're just so used to thinking of like the SEC trying to do that, but not anymore, folks. It's done. This is all getting wrapped up in a bow, and I couldn't be happier, especially as an XRP holder. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.